Right. Well, hello, everyone. Today is actually August 8th, which is also known as the Lionsgate portal. So welcome and happy Lionsgate portal to everyone. I know some people do a lot of ceremony and rituals on Lionsgate, which is the 8/8, and it's part of Leo season and the Lionsgate portal and all of that. So it is generally considered an auspicious day and a great day to set intentions, to just allow the energy to really also be behind your intentions that you might set. So we are just glad to have you all here. So anyway, so today, like I said, is Lionsgate. It is a great day, lots of energy. And it's funny because I didn't actually realize it until I was looking over my notes this morning about what, we were to talk about today. And the subject is all about intuition. And we'll talk a little bit about psychic impressions, what these things mean, all of that. But it is one of those things that, things just sometimes line up, especially when you are doing Reiki, talking about Reiki, that these things, we speaking of intuition and all of that divine appointment, that it's a perfect day to talk about this subject. And it's a perfect day to do a meditation or journey. I'm not sure how it will come out today because they're always channeled, but it's such a perfect subject for the day. And so then this morning, I knew it was Lionsgate. I knew we had this topic planned. And then this morning, when I was kind of like looking back over it, I was like, oh, look at that. It's perfect. And I didn't even realize the Distance Reiki share was on Lionsgate, but now in retrospect, it is divinely ordered. And I love how that is always orchestrated for us. And so, so today what we'll be talking about is about intuition and psychic impressions, kind of what they are, how you start to develop them, or if you have those strong senses already, how you can develop skills around them. And why it kind of can relate to the Lionsgate portal is because these big activated days, these big, transits, these big times. So, if you think about like solstices, if you think about these kind of energetic pieces, these cycles that we all are a part of as humanity, as a part of the earth, these are times where you can utilize the strong energy of the planet and of the cycles, but also a part of a community that's also doing a lot of the same things, right? And when we are adding these, when we're doing these things together, when we are tapping into these activation times, to these portals, we add those frequencies to the planet. We have this morphic resonance that can that we can tap into, that we can feel, that we it just adds power behind it. And I saw somebody put in the chat earlier that they were having really strong dreams last night, and I was like, oh, that's why I had crazy dreams last night, didn't sleep well, and now I'm looking in retrospect that this is why. I wasn't completely kind of aware of all of it, obviously, of all of it. So, and if you're watching this on YouTube later, just know that if you are attuned to Reiki, then you can send distance Reiki back to the Lionsgate portal, because we post these on Thursdays, and Lionsgate was on Tuesday. So you can send distance Reiki back to it. And if you're not attuned to Reiki, you can still kind of utilize that life force energy with the intentions that this time frame is also setting intentions for you, for this next cycle as we're going through it. So what we had kind of talked about, and we've talked about this often enough, about psychic impressions and intuition. I feel like we've talked about psychic impressions a decent amount, but we haven't also kind of had the intuition side of it, because psychic impressions, and when I say that term, what I mean is that they can look in all different forms. They can be, those eureka moments. They can be, maybe you have during a session, maybe you are seeing colors, or you are having feelings, or, you have, maybe you hear something or just have this knowing during a session, whether for yourself or whether if you're giving a Reiki session to somebody else. So that's one style of psychic impressions. And as I said, also a psychic impression can be like that aha, eureka moment, a download. Everything kind of comes into this moment of clarity where you're like, oh, that's what this is. Or these questions that I've been asking, here's the answer to them. That it's just this moment of really kind of intense is not always the right word, because it always doesn't feel intense, but this powerful moment of clarity and vision. So that's kind of one style of psychic impression. The other style of psychic impression can be like an intuitive sense, or, an impression during a Reiki session. So maybe it's for somebody else and you have this clarity for them that is helpful to them. Maybe it's about a question that they asked or an intention that they set for the Reiki session. It can also be for yourself during like maybe a self session, or maybe you're receiving a session from somebody else where you have this, again, this moment where you have this answer for yourself, and that is going to be a psychic impression. Sometimes, especially as we are developing a psychic impression, it is maybe just like, oh, I'm seeing, a color. A really common one that people see, especially when they first start Reiki, is that they might see the color violet. That's a very common one, or indigo, kind of purple violet color. And a lot of times for people, that is this indication of this kind of opening of their crown chakra, or if they're giving Reiki to somebody else, it's this opening of their crown chakra, which if you think about it with Reiki makes sense, because you are channeling life force energy down through the top of your head and out through your hands, also from the earth, out through your hands. But the way that I think most of us kind of think about it is this life force energy coming down through the top of our head. So, and the reason that we talk about these subjects is because we start to see them on day one, Reiki 1. There's that indication that the Reiki energy can open this side of ourselves. And so it's like, well, what do I do with that? For some people, it can be a little uncomfortable. For others, it's like this moment where all of these things kind of come together, and it's this moment of awakening for them. Other people have remembered these gifts that I think that we are all born with, that they have remembered them their whole life, and they've remembered them their whole life, and they need assistance, help from the Reiki energy, or teachers that can help with it. And how to kind of direct them might not be the right word, but have a container of learning around what to do with them, what they mean, or how do I utilize them in my life, in my Reiki practice. Other people may be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have psychic impressions. I'm not intuitive, because we think of it in a certain way. We think of it as, many times, like especially in our media, that we think of it as a psychic that can predict, exact, experiences or future date of something happening. Now I know that there are mediums that can help with those kinds of things. I know that there's training to be a medical intuitive. Some people are born with those gifts, and training can really help to hone those skills, hone those gifts, develop them. And so there are those kinds of people out there. There's trainings for those kinds of things. What I'm talking about isn't that predictive type of psychic impression. We are talking about impressions that help to give voice to maybe what the Reiki energy is doing, or what higher self needs, what higher self is saying to you or saying to your client, and being able to observe that and give voice to it. So that is that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about psychic impressions. So if we have an intention, what's the healing that may need to happen from our life? So that observation and giving voice to that observation can be really helpful around, those intentions. Here's what the Reiki is doing to help you heal this, and here's the kind of empowerment that can come in to help you manifest these intentions. So there is that part of psychic impressions. And there are also people, me being one of them, that thought that I didn't have intuition, thought that psychic impressions was out of the realm of possibilities for me, because all of you knowing Colleen and her being very right-brained, very artistic, her coming very easily to those kinds of things. I always thought, I'm not like that, so I must not be intuitive. I must not be capable of having psychic impressions, right? And then finding out that it works. We're all capable of doing it. We're all capable of having them, and it's a skill that can be developed. So whether or not you have them before you go into skill training, or whether or not, you might have it naturally and you may not, you have these gifts that you have more aptitude towards them before training. But now to find out that I am actually very intuitive, I can have psychic impressions. I have developed those, and now for myself and in sessions, I'm able to channel them out loud, and that it is a skill that you can develop. So it just works differently for me than for somebody else, because my mom being, Colleen being very right-brained, I always thought that's how it must have to happen. We see it in media in a certain way. That's how it must have to happen. Me, I'm very left-brained, and I'm very kind of linear, and not being that same way, I thought this wasn't possible for me. I don't have this within me. And now just knowing that I have a different way that it works for me than she does. I have a different way, and we all are going to have very innate ways and combinations that these things are going to work for us. And so that's kind of where we get into those ideas of the clairsenses, right? So how does our intuition work for us, and our psychic impressions work for us? And that's where you'll hear that term, clairsenses. So I'm just going to screen share really quick, because we did create a document. If you go to ReikiLifestyle.com, I'm logged into our WordPress, so yours is going to look slightly different. You can go to our free downloads here, and we have a bunch of different things here. But one of the things that we did create is a very introductory version of what the clairsenses are. So you can see that we have the 9. There can be more, there can be less, dependent on, who has written this, and different schools of thoughts around it. And I always thought, well, I'm not clairvoyant. I don't have clear seeing. I still don't. I don't see anything. So I must not be intuitive. But there's all of these different ways that our clairsenses can come to us. And so if you scroll down, you can see that, there's a short description of all of the different clairsenses that we have listed here. For me, I am more in the claircognizance, and one that we added is clairintellect, that we clear thinking. So that, again, that linear thought process, like we have to, mathematicians, scientists, they have intuition. It's how they have to come up with different experiments out of the blue and different things. Like that is a part of their intuitive process. If you think about like Einstein, he had intuition and, I would even say probably psychic downloads, right? Because how did he come up with these entirely different ways of thinking about things? And they were, on the backbone of other people's research and things like that. But that a lot of times that is that linear way of thinking. A lot of times how my thought process, my intuition comes through is through doing outlines, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, taking notes in a very linear fashion. That's a lot of times how I will journal or automatic write or free write. So just knowing that just because your psychic impressions may not look exactly how you think that they should look or how they look in our kind of society and media does not mean that you don't have the ability to have psychic downloads, and doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to be intuitive, and that it is something that you can develop and over time. And what happens with the Reiki energy is that the Reiki energy, because it's this spiritually guided life force energy, it helps awaken those parts of ourselves. And some people may not have any interest in developing this part of themselves or using Reiki energy for this part of themselves. But and that's okay. We each have our own way of practicing and are each our own style of utilizing Reiki energy or our different practices. But one of the reasons that we do talk about it is because it is something very common that we see in our students in our Reiki classes, and Reiki energy really opening up this part of them. And I think too, because of the nature of the style of practice that Colleen and I practice, which leans a little bit more on the spiritual side of things, each student is called to their teacher and each teacher is called to their student or client. So I think also we do find that people who come into our classes are they're, whether they know it or not, they're looking for, a certain style of practicing Reiki energy, or they have these experiences in their first attunement, and they happen to have teachers who are able to kind of explain maybe what they're experiencing. So the Reiki energy helps with this, facilitates this. We can also use the Reiki energy in our meditations, in our skill builders, in Reiki journeys to help develop this side of ourselves, this intuitive side of our practice. So there is also that piece that the Reiki energy itself, because it's an enlightened energy, we can have this, what's the word that I'm looking for? Intention, that's the word. We can have this intention that we would like the Reiki energy to help this side of us. Or maybe we have Reiki guides or spirit guides that come in that also can help develop this side of us. And that it is also skill building and skill training, and that the Reiki energy opens this side. We're never responsible for sharing. We just did a whole talk, I don't know, just a couple of months ago, maybe it was June, where we talked about our scope of practice. It could have been July, where we talked about our scope of practice as far as responsibility of sharing, if we responsibility of sharing, staying within our skill training, like if we're not therapists, if we're not doctors, some of those kinds of ethical boundaries that we can have as far as sharing impressions, that can help, so you can go and check that out. That's on YouTube. I don't want to go into it. It's a really long subject or scope of practice, but you can go and check that out on YouTube to kind of find out more about that piece of it. So as far as that is concerned, that's kind of what psychic impressions are. So how do you kind of tell the difference between those and fear or worry? Also, I want to talk a little bit about, our intuition as well, because to me, I think there's this beautiful weaving of the two, of psychic impressions and intuition, right? That there's this beautiful weaving of the two. Sometimes they come in the form of this eureka, aha, psychic impression moment. Sometimes we can go into a meditation, or we can go into a Reiki journey, or just a self Reiki session. And those kind of moments of clarity come through. Other time, intuition, I would say, can be a little bit more subtle. That is a bit more constant, like it's coming through, almost continuously. It's coming through all the time. I know that, like, for me, my intuition, which I've been working on developing, and I think that that's a continuous lifelong thing, which is actually really beautiful and really fun to think about, that we get to continue to develop it in different further and further levels. Like I'll have my psychic impressions or my channeling or my Reiki journeying during sessions, which is different than how I think of my intuition, which is this kind of daily underlying guidance to our life. And just as an example, one of the ways that I know that my intuition works is that, if I'm making a big decision about any category of my life, work, relationships, finances, personal life, health, all of these different categories that we might have in our life. I know that sometimes when I am guided to just say yes, and I am not sure why or what the outcome of this will be, I know that is my intuition speaking to me, that something is on the other side of that is the right answer for me. And it took me a long time to know that is the case for me, right? It took me multiple experiences that I'm like, I'm just saying yes, and I don't know why I'm saying yes. I'm just going to step into it and figure out everything else at the end, right? Or why I said yes. And so it took me multiple experiences to know that when I have that feeling of, okay, I just need to say yes here. When I have that feeling, that I know that is my intuition speaking to me to tell me that I need to take this step, whatever it may be. And so, that is kind of more of that idea of intuition, or maybe it can be this feeling of needing to take a left instead of a right, or maybe to make A decision instead of B decision. Yeah, Norma, to trust. That can be your intuition speaking to you. And so I just had a decision recently that I needed to make, and I just said yes. And before, I would say yes and not know that, okay, that really strong guidance of just saying yes means that on the other side of this it's good. It's all good. Whatever it may be, it's all good. And now that I hear that guidance saying yes, I fully trust it. And even though I still don't know what's on the other side of it, that I know that something is coming that is good in general. And actually, that was what started me in practicing Reiki professionally. Because, I've grown up in this. I have been a Reiki master since I was 20. So almost 20 years now. I'm almost 40. So almost 20 years now. And just, Colleen was practicing for forever. And so I just used it in my personal life. I wasn't, a professional practitioner for that long. So it was now, back in 2015 that I decided that I'm just going to go. Colleen had asked me, do you want to come work with me? And I just said yes. But I didn't know at the time that it would be so incredibly life-changing and fulfill so many of my life goals, and so fulfilling, and that it would be the happiness in work that I didn't know was possible. the happiness in this community that I didn't know was possible, and sessions, and this level of being able to dive into consciousness and personal healing, all of the things that come with having a Reiki practice, whether it's professional or not. And I didn't know that that is what that all meant, but I just said yes. And now looking back at the different times that I said that, I know that me just saying yes means that there's something on the other side of it. And now I know that, because that is a thing about intuition as well. We kind of can look back at these times and say, oh, I knew it, oh, I should have made that decision because I knew it at the time. Or you can look back and be like, oh, I made that decision. Like, I'm so glad that I made that decision. And there's this level in these practices that sometimes say, oh, it's not about the validation. And while that's true, the validation can really, really help us in learning to trust ourselves. So it's not about whether we got it right or wrong. Even the times when we got it wrong, like even the times like, I should have followed my gut, or I should have followed my guidance. That matters too, that we knew it afterwards, because what that starts to do is starts to help you discern in the moment of what that intuitive guidance feels like. So it's not about the validation in the idea, although sometimes you're like, sweet, I got it right. I'm just going to be completely honest on that, right? Like, yes, I got it right. And when you're doing sessions for others, you're like sometimes it's so mind blowing, the things that come through and then like relate to the other person that you may not know at all. And you're like, that's just incredible what this Reiki energy, what these external non-physical things can provide for us, and that mind-blowing experience. And so sometimes you're like, okay, that was really cool. But it's not about like being right or wrong. It is more about these moments of validation build our confidence in trusting ourselves, trusting the Reiki energy, and knowing now in the future, like now finding out how that feels to you, what that looks like to you, and how you can trust it more and more in the moment. And it doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to do that. There's still times where, like, I knew that in retrospect, I knew that. Why didn't I follow my gut in the moment, right? And that's okay too, because maybe next time you will, because you'll have that same feeling, you'll have that same impression or intuition come through. Again, because it'll come through again. And maybe that time you'll follow it, and you'll know that on the other side of it, there is something that is waiting for you that you knew. And it can be even a small decision. It can be even a small thing. And it can also be these really big life decisions. And so this is kind of that example of me saying yes, that I'm relating this back to, because now I know, because of all these times that I have now seen, when I get that feeling and I don't know why, that it's my intuition talking to me. And so now I know that I just made this decision and I just said yes, and I'm going to do it. And now I know that me saying that means that there's something coming for me from that in a very positive way, something that is going to be, it's like this is guiding me to even more either happiness or contentment, or all of those things that are good for our soul, are where we were meant to go, our path, all of those things that come from listening to kind of our higher selves. And so that's what I mean of like getting used to what that feels like, getting used to seeing that. Because for me, being a left brain thinker, having all of these years of thinking that I didn't have intuition, I've got a lot of unlearning to do. I have healing to do. I have empowerment to do around that in the way that it all works for me. And that's a process. And I think it's a lifelong process, right? Releasing that culturally created self around it. Or even if you have a natural aptitude towards these gifts, towards your intuition, you're really good at hearing it, or maybe it hasn't been as covered for you in your life. Or maybe you have psychic impressions, gifts, maybe the veils can be thin for you. more than, for other people, still being able to that discernment with it, which is also another piece of this. How do we discern between the fear, worry, resistance, all of those things that can also get muddled with which is which, right? How do we know which is which? And, that is another one that's a learning process. You getting to know how your body feels when you're in each. When you're in maybe overthinking, when you're in worry, when you're in this fear state versus when you're in this intuition state, which is a calmer feeling in your body, which is a more grounded state in your body. It is definitely a different sensation, and in your mind too. It's not to say that there can't be some overthinking with it, because you do have to process through the different decisions that you make. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just this instant knowing, which is true too. Other times, you do have to process through some of the, maybe the back and forth around it. This is more for self than for others, although it does crop up with others as well. Usually when that happens, I now know that it's more about what they're going through with it rather than what I'm going through with it. And I'm picking up on their stuff with it as opposed to my own. So that is another process of discernment, of really dropping into how it's actually feeling in your body. Like if I'm in this place of worry and overthinking or resistance, step into it. Don't necessarily push it away. Sit with it, feel into it. And that's going to also help you to discern, what is this actually? Is this me? Or is this me? Or is this like this kind of fear, worry thing, which can come from all different places? It can come from this life's experiences, past life experiences, genetic experiences. It can come from, from all of those kinds of things. It can come from culturally created self. There's all of these different aspects that can create that piece of it. Reiki energy, bringing in the Reiki energy. So as you're sitting with it, bringing in the Reiki energy can also help, because what Reiki energy can do is it's not only this higher self, this spiritually guided life force energy that helps us to discern what is our higher self and what might be those trauma responses. I don't know what else to use there instead of that word. It's not always like a trauma. It can just be, a culturally created belief that maybe causes us to have this fear and worry. But sitting with the Reiki energy also can help calm down our nervous system, because that is a part of what it does. It's a stress reduction technique. It's a relaxation technique, that we know it's a pain relief technique. Those are some of the things that it can really help us do. And so if we can sit within it, bring in the Reiki energy, it can calm down all of those parts of it so that we can hear, see more clearly, so that we can go into what is actually real and what is not real. And that, again, that's a process. This takes time. It takes validation, right? It takes that knowing in retrospect that, oh, that was just fear and worry. Oh, wait, no, my fear and worry in that was actually valid. And that was a decision or something that I shouldn't have made. Or in the times where it is, in the times where it is actually like, there's a real life thing that you need to have fear around, right? That we sometimes know about, those like hair standing on the back of my head type things, and my back of my neck type things, that can also just help discern that for you, that is that real or is it not? Is this just this fear response that I'm having? So the Reiki energy can really help in that discernment process for you with intuition and with psychic impressions too.